Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Joshua. Today we're looking at Joshua chapter 12. Now, chapter 12 gives a listing of all the kings and kingdoms that the Israelites had conquered in their conquest of the Promised Land. So it sort of catalogs all the different kingdoms that had come under the rule of the Israelites through their conquest. Now, the first 6 verses of chapter 12 talk about the possession of the land east of the Jordan. This is on the other side of the Jordan River. This is the territory they took before they crossed the Jordan into the Promised Land proper. This area was conquered under Moses before Moses died. So as it says in verse 1, "Now these are the kings of the land whom the Israelites had defeated, and whose territory they took east of the Jordan, from the Arnon Gorge to Mount Hermon, including all the eastern side of the Arabah." And then as you read through the end of verse 6, it says basically these are 2 kingdoms. The first was, verse 2, was Sihon, who was the king of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon. And then another king is mentioned in verse 4, and also the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the last of the Rephites, who reigned in Ashtaroth and Edrei. So these 2 kings, Sihon and Og, and their kingdoms were conquered under the leadership of Moses on the east side of the Jordan River. You remember some of the tribes, and we'll get to this in a little bit, asked for land there, and they were given land on the east side of the Jordan River. So they're detailed in the conquering. Notice it says in verse 6, "Now Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the Israelites conquered them," that is Sihon and Og. "And Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh to be their possession." So see, these tribes, Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, inherited on the east side of the Jordan River. Now they promised, and they fulfilled their promise, their fighting men would cross over the Jordan and help their brothers take possession of the promised land, and then they would return to their possession on the east side of the Jordan. And they fulfilled their promise. They did exactly as they said they would do. So, in this chapter, the first cataloging is on the east side of the Jordan, the 2 kingdoms of Sihon and Og. And then as you get into verse 7, talks about the taking of the promised land proper. Verse 7 says, "Now here's a list of the kings of the land that Joshua and the Israelites conquered on the west side of the Jordan, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir," that's Edom. "Joshua gave their lands as an inheritance to the tribes of Israel, according to their tribal divisions. The lands included the hill country, the western foothills, the Arabah, the mountain slopes, the wilderness, the Negev. These were the lands of the Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. These were the kings." So, they list all the land, the promised land proper, that Israel took under the leadership of Joshua. And then verses 9 through verse 24, they list all the kings. It begins with the king of Jericho and the king of Ai, near Bethel. Remember, those were the first 2 conquered. And then it lists them all. We won't read all the names. But if you read through that list, there's a cataloging of 31 different kings and their kingdoms that were conquered by Joshua. So chapter 12 is simply a catalog of the area that Israel had taken in their possession of the promised land. They control the land of Israel, what will become known as Israel, and they also control on the east side of the Jordan River. Today that is the country of Jordan, but then it was part of Israel. So this had come into the possession of the Israelites through the promise of God. Moses began, and Joshua took over the leadership as they crossed the Jordan River and led them to take possession of the rest of the land. So to get to the end of chapter 12, Israel is now in possession of the promised land. Now, they've not conquered every square inch. As we're going to see in chapter 13, there are still a few more areas to be subdued. But by and large, the land is under their control. And so the next item of business is the division of the land. I've already seen that Reuben and Gad and Manasseh, they're going to have their possession on the east side of the Jordan. But what about the promised land proper? Well, rest of the book of Joshua, Joshua is going to divide the land among the tribes. It's going to be parceled out. The larger tribes will get more land, the smaller tribes will get less, but it's going to be done as fairly as they possibly can. And so now the book moves to the parceling out of the promised land, giving it to the different tribes as their homeland and their possession. And we'll begin to look at that in tomorrow's session. So join us next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Joshua.